Welcome, everybody. I'm very excited to talk about what the different ways that we can help you learn how to extend your copilots with actions and get at that data that means the most to you. I'd just like to introduce myself. I'm Nathan Helgren. I'm a principal product manager in Dataverse, and I'm focusing specifically on Copilot extensibility. And also with me is Mankarat.
Hi
Mankar-
everyone, I'm Ankit. You can also call me MK. I'm Senior Product Manager at Microsoft. So the areas that I work on are testing and analytics.
Excellent. So we're going to talk about a couple different things here today. We're going to show you how to do some extensibility, but first thing I want to do is just take a brief moment to talk about the different types of agents. So as you're probably aware, there are agents exist within Copilots, and agents are a way to take multiple different components that you want to use and package them all together so that your Copilot can get all of the data you need to answer any questions. This is a great way for you to do things like get data from your enterprise systems, to look at documents that you want to be able to use, to find websites that you want to be able to include, and putting them in a single package. So that way, when you enable that in a Copilot, everything all works together. So there are two different types of agents that are available, and I just want to call out some of the differences because people are like, what's the difference between a custom and a declarative? What is a declarative? So first off, custom copilots are now called custom agents, and then declarative are declarative agents. Declarative agents are built specifically to work with Microsoft 365. So they don't really do anything on their own. When you build them within the library in Microsoft Copilot Studio, and they are meant to be used in Microsoft 365 and Teams to be able to utilize your data. You're able to add in knowledge sources, prompts, and actions. You can put in data like starter prompts and things to help invocation and access the data. And that all this information is stored inside of the library in Copilot Studio. Custom copilots are meant to be used anywhere. So you build them within Microsoft Copilot Studio. You can use them there. You can use them in Microsoft 365, but you can also attach them to websites. You can attach them to other apps like Dynamics. You can attach them to a lot of different things. So it gives you the ability to utilize as much more broadly than just inside of M365. The thing is, you need to be able to understand your models that you're using. So you have to configure which model you're using. So like if you're using, for example, GPT 3.5 or 2.0 or 4.0, so you have to do a little bit more configuration, but these allow you to utilize these as kind of standalone items. We're going to be talking and using custom today as our example, but the items that we're showing you will work in both. So one thing that's kind of key here is extensibility of Copilot. So when you're using Copilot by itself, if you just go into Teams or into Bing or anything using Copilot, it's using base knowledge that's available to everybody. It's information that's being culled from the internet and from also the learnings that the Copilot has when it was created. Now, this allows you to get information about anything that's on the internet if you want to search for details like how do I write an Excel formula for this particular problem, but it doesn't know anything about your business. The nice thing about extensibility is being able to take your enterprise data and bring it into your Copilot so it does exactly what you need and lets you access your data in a meaningful way and be able to utilize that to help out your customers. So what you'll do is you'll extend that information by adding additional knowledge to it and actions that will be able to get to your business data. You can build flows, you can build automation, you can build all kinds of different things off of this that are going to help you make this Copilot do the job that you need it to do within your organization or your company. So if you have basically, again, as I mentioned, your general knowledge that you have are things like the world knowledge, natural knowledge, artificial intelligence, and that comes by default with Copilot. But what you want to do really is be able to access that enterprise data. You want to be able to access your apps. You want to be able to access Microsoft Graph. And the important thing is between the general knowledge and enterprise knowledge is general knowledge is available to everybody. It's available through the Copilot and through the internet. Enterprise knowledge requires us to be able to provide authentication so that it makes sure the right people have access to the right data. So we're going to show you some of these setups today and talk about these items. One of the things we want to just talk about are actions. So actions are how we enhance or extend Copilots, one of the ways. And there are a lot of different action types you can use that are going to allow you to add in information. So a connector is the Microsoft Power Platform connector. Many of you probably very familiar with that. Any of our connectors that are out there are available for you to use now. Not all of them have had all their actions tested for Copilot because, as you know, these have been built for, I don't know, 7-8 years, right? We have got 1,300 of these. So when you pick a connector, you're going to want to do some validation and make sure the actions you want to use work, or If that doesn't work, then you can make a new connector or use a REST API to get to the data you want to get to. But connectors allow you to connect to any of those external data sources. So if you have your data in SQL, you have your data in Freshdesk, you have your data in Adobe, you can go any of those to get that data. Prompts allow you to basically write out a a sentence that points to data sets and allows you to prompt the user to ask questions to gather information, and then we'll be able to retrieve it and display it based on different parameters. Conversational actions are basically Q&A bots. The old days that we used to have just the bot system, they're called conversational now. Flow actions allow you to build a flow, an automate flow that's going to be based off of the different data sources you have access to, but you can trigger it by entering in specific queries and information into your Copilot. And then REST API is just an alternate way of getting to those external data sources. So if you don't have a connector that's built and you don't want to build a connector, you can go directly through an API now and access your data directly. So I'm going to switch over here to doing a live demo. And we all know what happens with live demos. So let's be prepared for some excitement. All right, so here we've got two different tabs here. The first tab I'm going to go is, we have two tabs because one of these has some analytics that we're going to go over later. I'm going to pick my agent. If you're inside agents, you pick an agent, that's a custom agent. If you build an agent in here, that is a custom agent. Once this agent loads up, we'll be able to see the content that's available within it. And there we go. Hooray. Okay, nice. So here's our agent. And our agent has some analytics, which MK will talk about here in just a moment. Right now, we don't have any knowledge. We see that we had some actions here for Adobe, and these were added in previously, and that allows us to extend our agent, and our Copilot to access this Adobe data. So it lets you create a library template. It allows you to upload a document. It does a lot of different things. So what we want to do is we want to be able to add another action here, and I want to actually just get a list of all the agreements for Adobe Acrobat. So if I'm going to do this for a connector, and this is the first one I'm going to show you, it's pretty easy. We'll click Add Action, and then we have a list of actions that are available to us. And as I said, there are all of the actions that are available through Microsoft connectors. So I'm going to look for Adobe Acrobat, and when it comes up, I want to find the item that's going to let us get a list of the agreements. So let's see, which is the one I want? Agreements, search, get a list of all agreements. So I pick that as my connector. Now the connectors themselves, as you're aware, are a collection of APIs that have authentication built into them. So it knows how to authenticate with Adobe. We don't have to tell it exactly how to how to access it. So we don't have to provide secrets and all the other information you normally do if you're trying to create a connection itself. What it's going to do right now is it's going to check to see if I already have a connection to Adobe so I can set it up. So I do. And so now it'll allow me to set this up. Otherwise, it would ask me to create one. Now, here is my item. So get a list of agreements as the title. And then we have a description. This operation fetches a list of agreements for the user. So this information is important because the description is how you trigger the action through an LLM. What I want to do is I want to add to this a little bit. So this is saying it fetches a list of agreements. I can always let's put in some synonyms. Get, retrieve, find, return. These are additional synonyms that now when I use any of these terms, the LLM will understand that I want to utilize this particular action to retrieve the data back. And so without these, you might have to type in the exact terminology. So that's a little bit tedious. So sometimes we want to put in synonyms to make that easier. Now we're adding this to a custom agent. We also pick what type of authentication we want. We're going to use user authentication, which means that each user is going to have to authenticate to be able to use this data. That's our most secure option. And of course, that's what we want. And then as we build it also, if you look at inputs and outputs, we can go here and see what kind of inputs and outputs that we have that we can specify here for creating this item. I'm going to leave this blank for now because I'm just going to use this direct query to get all of the data that's available. I click Add Action, and now the system is going to add the action into my agent. And once it adds it into the agent, it's going to show me that it's present, and we have a test panel that we'll be using just a moment to test it. So now we see here's my action to get agreements. So here's a nice little test panel. MK is going to do a little deeper dive on this right now, but I'm just going to do this to show you that it actually works. So now that I have this set up, I will say get agreements. Let's see, open. Let's just do our open agreements on this one. So I want to get my open agreements for Adobe, and it's going to retrieve the agreements for me. It's doing the processing here inside, and we'll talk about the side panel here just a little bit after we get through the REST API portion, but it's returning the values that we have. It's applying my query and saying that it only wants to get the open agreements. And so now we have, here are my open agreements. So these are the agreements that are available through Adobe and the information that's available for them. So it's just that easy to extend to get to your data from these additional external sources. So now what I'm going to do next is I'm going to switch over to a different item here because I'm going to do some work with REST APIs. So what happens if you want to go ahead and add data into an agent and you don't have a connector built, or the connectors that built don't meet your needs and you want to have this a little bit more customized? You can go through the route of using REST APIs. Now, the REST API functionality allows you to use REST API swaggers or manifests, drop those into the system and configure it for use. So this is something that's a little bit more high code because you have to build your REST API or configure it ahead of time. But from here, the process to add them is very similar. So I go to Actions and click Add Action. It's going to come up with a list of all these actions available to me. But what I want to do is I would tell it I want to use a new REST API. I know the thing I want to do is not present here. So it's going to ask me to upload my specification. So if I click on this, it'll open up my search window and I go to my downloads and I want to go in here. And this is the swagger I'm going to use. When I upload it, it processes it and shows me here's the specification. So I can verify, yeah, is this the right item? Did I click on the right swagger file? I did. Perfect. So now I'm ready to move forward. I click next. Now I can go through and give it the name and the description again. So this one I'm going to name account ticket management service. Oh, too long. TMS. All right, description. This will be a service to get, retrieve, find, locate tickets, and create new tickets. Now, one thing I didn't mention previously on the other screen, and I'll take just a moment here to talk about, is you notice here we have a solution dropdown. So whenever you add in and build yourself a connection or an action, it will place it into a solution. Now, you can choose which solution you want to put in. So you can pick any solution that's in your system. If you have a default solution selected for your environment, it will stick it into that default solution. If you specify nothing, it will create a brand new solution with the name of this action and store it in there. So nothing goes into the default solution. Everything gets stored in individual solutions. You can just decide where you want to put it or if you want a brand new one to be created. I'm going to let it go ahead and create a new one this time. And when I click next on this next screen, it's going to validate that I have a unique name. It's also validating at this point my swagger to tell me whether or not my API spec is correct. If I have any errors in my API spec, it will give me a message telling me that there's a problem with the spec and it can't upload it and create it. And I would have to go back and manually update that spec and re-add it to the system. Next, we choose our authentication model. So this is a non-auth particular item just because it makes it a little bit easier to demo. But for example, you could pick API key or auth 2.0. If I pick auth 2.0, you'll see it's going to ask me for all the typical things: client ID, client secret, auth URL, token URL. So you have to fill in all the standard items so you have the ability to have full security using auth 2.0, and coming up soon, API key. And so you'll be able to specify all of that information. I need to put none here for this particular use and click next. And after it creates this next step, it will take me to the list of actions that I want to add. And so I'll be able to specify out of this swagger which of the actions I want to use. And this is extremely helpful because, as you know, whenever you have an API and wherever you have settings, you might have multiple actions on them. So I want people to be able to get tickets. So here's get tickets. And again, we have our description. I'll add in here, get, retrieve, and then click next. Here shows my inputs and outputs, so the different things I can tell it to input to get the data, the different outputs that will come back when I submit it. So you can see all the information we have here to be able to interact with. there are a couple other things that we currently not going to dive too deep into, like adaptive cards and such. So I'm just going to head and just click past those really quickly. But an adaptive card will help it kind of change the display and give you a more user-friendly card experience. But we will skip past that and talk about that in a later session. Right now, we just want to show you building these, testing these, and giving you some analytics information. So once I get to this next stage and it adds that particular action for me, I can choose to add an additional action. So get tickets is ready. I also wanted to create a ticket. So I'm going to just go through and add that as well. So that's ready to use. Now, one other nice thing to note, as I mentioned, is you're picking which actions you want to use. So as we get to this process, when it comes to this next page here and shows me the list, you can notice that I have options for update and delete also. If I don't configure update and delete, they can't use that feature. So I don't want people to be able to delete tickets. I want them to create them and get them. I don't want delete and update as an option. So we won't choose those, and users can't use that within this system. Conversation starters, these are used within Microsoft 365 to display options for users to be able to have a quick click option to go to at the data. Since we're not going into Microsoft 365 today, I won't focus on that at this moment. So now here are the actions I'm adding. So I'll click next. And what it's going to do is add these actions into the system so that I can add them into my agent. Now, this is one thing to be aware of is at this moment, you go through the process of adding this REST API and configuring it and setting it up. That's creating it. That's not actually adding them to the agent yet. That's making them available to the agent. We're finishing our configuration. We're setting our authentication. We're setting all of our parameters. So it builds the items that you then can add to the agent. We're investigating ways to kind of streamline that a little bit better in the future so that you can do an add directly as part of this process. But right now, I'll just show you how this works. So we will come back here. I'll do a quick refresh just to make sure that things are available in the system. And as soon as this comes back up, we will add these actions to our agent. It's coming. There we go. Okay, good. Isn't that always the great tension moment for a demo? Everybody's like on the edge of their seats, like, oh, it's gonna work, it's gonna work. Cross your fingers. All right. So now we have the system. I'm gonna click it. I'm gonna tell it to add an action. And we will see our actions here. And so account TMS, I will see we want to get the tickets from the library. I'll add that. And as I click on that, it takes just a moment for it to process. It's going to check to see if I have a connection. It's important that's checking your connection right now because it's seeing, do I have the permission to add this? And then later we try to run it, it will ask you to sign in. So this is just our verification and our ability to add in the authentication model. Hooray! All right. So now it's coming up saying, yes, you do have a connection. You can add this. Good job. So here's the action we have. You'll see right here's the description that I added in before. It has my additional information I added. Because I added that when I created it, it's going to show up every time I add it in any one of my agents. Here's my user authentication. And again, here's my inputs and output information. I can go in here and specify additional inputs and outputs, but I am not going to for the get. Then I click add action. It's going to add it to my agent for use. And I'm going to go through and add both of these right now because we're going to test these in just a moment with MK. So just bear with me for a moment while I add both of these. But as you add these actions, once they're added here and they show up here in the actions list, now they're ready to be used within this agent. So now I'm going to go to account TMS and do add the create option just as well. And again, it's double checking that I have access to make sure that to access and permissions to be able to use that with this connection. It's going to do that every time you add one of these connections. It's going to validate that you have permissions to work with it. So make sure that even as a maker, I can't connect to something and build connections to something that I don't have permissions to access. And then I will complete this. And as soon as this is done, then I will be turning this over to MK, who will talk a little bit about our testing experience that we have and some analytics and other things. So as you can see here, now we have these two actions added to the agent. We're ready to test it and determine if it's there. Before I jump to MK, two things I want to make sure you know. If you're trying to use anything that's inside of these action section in your agents, you need to turn on generative AI. It may not be turned on by default. And if you do not turn this on, it cannot use any of our connections and actions. So that needs to be on. Another thing you might want to turn on or off is allow AI to use its general knowledge. If you only want it to use the stuff in actions and knowledge, turn this off. It won't use any websites and any knowledge it has built in. If you are okay with it using additional sources of knowledge, you can keep that turned on. All right, MK, would you like to take over now and talk about the testing experience?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Nathan. I feel like everybody was on edge of seats to see the demo working. So, so it's amazing to see it. So, yeah, it's a couple of clicks and the actions get added. So let's get into testing. When it comes to testing, there are two things to note. One, that you have the test panel just on your right side, which says on the top over here, test your agent, which allows you to test it in line itself, which is like you don't have to publish, you are just in your system, you can try out before it gets published. And second part of it is activity mapping, which I'll just show in just a couple of seconds. But for both of these things to work, for the second part to work effectively, as Nathan mentioned, that generative AI has to be turned on so that it starts working. So let's get it. Let's get into it. So it. Oh, Nathan, I might not be able to type. Okay. Tickets. So I'll interact with chatbots similar to what I expect my user to type in, and let's see how it works. So now this activity, as I was mentioning earlier, your activity map gets logged in. So activity map is like today, whenever you're typing anything on your test boards or on your actual boards, it's very hard to figure out what's happening behind the scene because AI and LLM world are so new altogether. I know it's like 2 years, but they're still a relatively new in the world itself for you to figure out that, okay, what's happening behind the scene? Did I put in the right query itself? Is this something I should have done while authoring it altogether? So this activity map acts like a mirror that tells you how is Copilot thinking and how is it doing things behind the scene altogether. Like for example, over here, it when I typed tickets, it looked at, okay, yeah, there's something called tickets. There's a connector which has tickets, so this works. It requires me to make a connection with my API. So it's giving me an option to connect or retry. So if I click on connect, it should open a modal for me to type in my credentials and go forward with it. In this case, because as Nathan mentioned, it was not something that we had a fancy password behind it. So we'll just go ahead and click on connect so that we build a connection over here. So previously, to build a connection, there used to be an experience that used to take a longer time. There was a separate platform altogether. But now building a connection is also in line. So you come over here, if there's a connection that's not built, it will just show you, prompt you, and you can just go ahead with it. So I clicked on connect. Because in this one I did not have a password or anything to enter, so it just went ahead. I'll go back. So in this case, what we understood from the activity map that, yay, see, we found that as soon as we clicked on retry, what we see over here, let me scroll down because taking control at a different screen, so just taking a little bit of time. Nathan, can you scroll it down for me?
Sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm right.
There you go.
Yeah, so as you can see, all the three tickets started showing up with the title, description, assignment, and everything else. And yeah, like it worked. Whatever you added in REST API, it started working. But the interesting thing is also on the left side of it, because you see that there was in terms of input, you just had to ask the get command altogether. That's it. In terms of output, what you got, which can be 3 items, 4 items, 5 items, like depending upon what your clear query is. So let's look at the second part of it because Nathan also added create a ticket as well. So let's go ahead to the second one. Create. Go ahead with that one. So yes. So the interesting part is why I knew I had to add two of these things, but I just waited for a second just to see what comes up in input and output. So when it comes to many of these things, this model is very helpful because it will tell you what are the inputs that are expected by LLM in order to give you an information, and what are the outputs that will come out. Like in this case, it tells that there are two things that have to be added, which are like title and description, that are like the important fields altogether. And that's something that even LLM will tell you about it as well. But this becomes an easier way for you to go ahead and check out that, okay, this is what will come up, this is what the output is going to be. So I need to add all of those things. So let me add the title, uh, add title item 4 with description.
MK, I believe it's just prompting you for the title. So it's just asking you what you would like the title to be.
Yeah, add title item 4. Cool. And the other thing is, like many a times, like how as soon as I added title, the input column started filling out because it just captured that this is the right one. Next one is description. Now it will also ask me for description. And as description, I'll just add test, just to make it quick. Perfect. Now let's do the get command all again. Let's do get all tickets. So this is how it becomes very easy to brainstorm and try it together, because you see both of these things happening side by side. And as you see that day, because I did not write get my tickets, the entire description was not sufficient enough. So it went to knowledge source altogether. So now you know that what can happen over there, and you can make the changes accordingly. After some time, it was able to retrieve it again. So it started showing me all the item 4 altogether. It took some time for it to course correct and give the answer altogether. But this kind of acts like your left side buddy in order to tell you what's happening behind the scene, what I can do to improve it altogether. If you don't see your connector being picked altogether, the most important thing could be description. That's something that you can change. Other thing is that you only don't have to rely on the right side panel in order to make any of these additions. You can also click on edit over here, and this entire panel will also open up for you in this section as well, and you can make edit right over there itself. If I have to change the display name or description itself, I can go ahead and change in this section as well. Secondly, also the inputs and outputs as well. And it also allows me to add inputs too. Like if there are more fields that I want to add, if there are certain fields I also want to remove, I can do that even from this panel, making it very easier to do it very smoothly. So this is the way to test out most of these custom agents. One, as said earlier, one, that you have your right side panel where you can try out the queries very similar to what a user will try, and see, is the response acceptable for you, is it coming in the format that you wanted it to be. And second is this activity panel altogether, which gives you an idea about what's happening behind the scene. Is it picking up the right description? Do have you added all the right inputs and outputs? And it will always prompt you whenever it's missing, so you can go back and check out and improve it. You can make an edit in the action itself, or you can just click on edit in the panel the way I did right now, and just go ahead and add those details in. So this is how to test it. And after you have tested it, you will be publishing your agent, and it will be out for your users. At that time, it's very difficult to analyze, are your users happy? Are they getting the answers that they desire? Are people even using my agent? So that's a question. Whenever you create something, that's a question that comes to your mind. So I'll just go in quickly 1 second to show how you can get the answers to it through analytics. So in this CA itself, there is something called analytics as well. There's a different tab for it altogether. Highly recommend going to the new view altogether, turning on this toggle because that view is much more simpler, much more easier to read. So some improvements have been made. In this one, it told me because me and Nathan have tested it for a while. So the total number of sessions that have happened till now are 18. Out of them, how many of them had multiple questions? 11% of them had like more than one question itself. So it tells you about the total session engagement rate, overall satisfaction rate altogether, and also the time range of it. So you have a filter above in order, by default it's 7 days, but you can always change it to a month or a duration that you desire it to see. Generally, this analytics take almost 1 hour to start reflecting. So if you don't see it within your first hour, don't be surprised. After 1 hour, it starts showing up altogether. So this is a great way for you to know that, okay, are my users happy? Are they utilizing my agent? Or if they are utilizing it, how many sessions that they had? And also just something to note that in this area, we are making a lot of improvements. There is also a knowledge specific tab in analytics, and there will be an action one coming up very soon. So all of them will have like a lot more details that will show you what's happening for your agent, and you can improve based on the user feedback. And yeah, this makes us come to the end of it. I'll just pause on. I'll just pause here for a second if anybody has a question, or I'll see check out the chat as well.